markets finished on a down note today after mostly flat on a little bit of hotter than expected inflation news in the producer price index that was reported on today, and dropped about 300 points. And it's the worst week since September. The stocks finished lower today with all major averages posting losses. Dow finished down 305 points, 0.9%. S&P down 0.73, NASDAQ down 0.7. And basically what is going on is that the attention shifted to the consumer price index that's due out next Tuesday, which is expected to show whether inflation has receded. The Fed will likely deliver 50 basis points at the end of the December meeting. But if the inflation is hot, they might go a little stronger. It's our expectation that we really need to see inflation come down closer to the Fed funds rate for the Fed to pause. And we still have quite a bit of delta between those numbers, is what one of the Fed members, or Stephanie Lang, Chief Investment Officer at Homrich Berg. And, again, that inflation number that came out today kind of spooked the markets a little bit. Wholesale prices rose 0.3% in November, more than expected, in the hopes that inflation is cooling. So again, if we get a hot inflation print, the Fed may be likely to do 75 basis points, if not 50-50 versus 75-25. But they definitely are targeting that 5.5% Fed funds rate to get it above inflation, if and when inflation can get back down into the 5s and 4s, and then we go into recession watch into next year like we've been talking about. So right now, here's Bitcoin still kind of ranging in this area here, a little bit up and down, tried to push the upper range again, lost that with the markets and is now pushing down. So price is going to continue to consolidate in this range, and the likelihood of another shot to the downside to test this low is probably in the cards, maybe through the weekend, maybe going into next week. May not happen until next week based on what the Fed does and what inflation does. If it's good news, then we might see maybe drops to the lower end of this range, might see a rebound back up and push the upper end of this range to the 18,000 level. And if it's bad news, then definitely going to retest the bottom here, maybe crack it and move on to those lower levels. Let's take a look at the Dow here. Continuing the downtrend here, had a little pause, kind of like back in August. Continue to work its way down. NASDAQ, same thing, a little bit of a pause like back in August, continuing to work its way down. Same thing with S&P. So all of the levels on continuation. The VIX, continuation, it's run up, kind of like the last time we saw. And as we have talked about, this level, when the VIX is low, that's when you can look for those reversals in markets to work its way back up toward the range here. Not guaranteed, but it's kind of what the market's been doing really since the peak back here in March, when the VIX kind of topped out at 37, 38 back in March. And it's been kind of doing that little dance ever since. And basically, when the VIX is low, it's a good time to sell. When the VIX is high, it's been a good time to buy in this bear market so far. The Dixie tried to put in a little bit of a rally today, got held up a little bit. And the 10-year put in a move, a little bit of a rebound today. Question is, will it continue to march lower, or is this going to be, an attempt to reverse this downtrend that the 10-year has been in, which has, brought interest rates down for mortgages. So a little bit of a reprieve in the mortgage market, but this time of year is the slowest time of the year in the housing market. So not really affecting a whole lot of demand, definitely not in the refinance, because the rates are still really high for a lot of people that are already locked into low rate mortgages. Oil is a topic of conversation lately, and dropped down to 70 a barrel, found support, bounced back. So the question is, where will oil fall? Will it fall back to that $60 a barrel range, where you have the last major support that was tapped a couple of times before it went back on that run? And right now, there's a little bit of consensus it's going to check that $60 barrel range again. And then some people are projecting, $100 and $200 barrel oil. So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes, with China demand dropping, with the cap on Russian oil, things like that. And with Saudi Arabia and OPEC not reducing production, it's kind of keeping prices low. So we'll have to just see how all this plays out as we move along. And then again, as we get into next week. All eyes on inflation and the Fed. And of course, Tuesday, we have Sam Bankman-Fried that's going to testify before Congress. So that should be interesting to hear, what's going on there and what happens. And there continues to be more and more fallout from FTX and what was going on. But as that gets uncovered, then we are likely to see potential exposure of other things in the space, like we talked about with Binance, Tether, those types of things. And so there could be some shockwaves through the industry with FTX as the Justice Department, SEC, CFTC, federal authorities around the world start to dig in and start to follow the money and chase that down and find out what was really going on with FTX. So interesting times, a lot going on, a lot happening. We'll get a lot more color next week on what inflation is looking like. Has it really peaked, plateaued? Is it starting to come down? Is the Fed's work starting to have a little bit of an effect? And then what's the Fed's response to that going to be? And what is their guidance moving forward? So we get a lot of clarity next week that we can get through the holidays, maybe get a nice little Santa Claus rally. And like I said, we've been looking for the markets to decline into all of that, maybe drop a little bit depending on the Fed, and then we can, start looking for that Santa Claus rally. So we will dig into all that next week. Until then, these are the things I'm looking at. I will see you on the next video.